Joining us now is Adonis Albright, an anchor reporter here at One America News. Adonis, a lot of moving parts, to say the least, regarding this, what can only be described as a bizarre story. I mean, so many different facets, so many different developments, and still these parents are out on the run. What can you tell us about the latest developments, and are police any closer to catching the people who killed these two children?
Yeah, Alex, so to answer the latter part of your question, I don't believe that authorities are closer to finding these kids. The evidence that they have so far in this investigation, they're not definitively saying it, but all signs point to them being dead, unfortunately. But in terms of what's latest for the case, you mentioned some of it there, the storage facility where they found some of the kids' belongings. It's unclear that inside the residence in Rexburg, Idaho, if any of their stuff is still inside the residence. Authorities, of course, are remaining very tight-lipped about that. They also found recently in Arizona where the 7-year-old kid who was diagnosed with autism, he attended school there in Arizona before they moved to Idaho. There was activity on an app that they use for a classroom. It was communications, so parents can check in on what their kids are doing within the classroom. The school recently realized that there was Lori Vallow, the mom, was using that app repeatedly. Possibly, it's believed to look in on communications, seemingly about the whereabouts of her son. Possibly, the school realized that she was using it. The kid obviously hasn't attended the university, the school for quite some time now. Right. So the school went ahead and discontinued her use from the app. As you mentioned, the storage facility. There's also the girl's phone, the 17-year-old girl's phone that was found on the mom's belongings. There has been some talk what kind of teenager wouldn't have their phone on them. Right. There's also been those texts that you mentioned, also those 2 mysterious Venmo payments. So all this evidence is really pointing to, those kids, they still haven't been found since September. So, obviously it's too early to make a definitive
statement about what happened to those kids.
Yes,
I agree.
Exactly,
and I actually misspoke a little bit earlier in the segment as well. As of now, family members are fearing the worst, but police have not definitively said what happened to these kids yet. Of course, they are keeping hopes alive that these kids are still somewhere. But once again, you bring up that cell phone especially. Not only is the mother with that cell phone, it seems like something that would have been turned over to authorities if they were serious about really finding these missing children, if that were to be the case. But you bring up Lori Vallow, too, and I kind of want to break down her kind of whole dynamic a little bit as well. We kind of went through her previous ties to these mysterious deaths that have taken place in her life, but she also has some ties to this, maybe people have called it an extreme religious group. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's really weird. The circumstances of how this couple essentially met, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, I guess the husband still is an author of End of Times novels, very apocalypse, post-end times type deal. So his work is possibly what led Lori Vallow. It's obviously it's still unconfirmed at this point, but it's believed that this somehow contributed to them ending up together as a couple. The group that they are, it has now been confirmed by the aunt and as well as the grandparents that are searching for these kids, that Lori Vallow was involved in some type of religious extremist fringe group, as they're describing it. All of this is still unclear. We don't have the name of the group, but we do know that the husband ran a religious content website online, possibly linked to whatever may have befallen these kids. Right. It's still very much up in the air, but I think what we're going to see is this is going to be the focus of the investigation. Obviously, authorities are still remaining very tight-lipped about this. They don't want to make any assumptions until they have all their ducks lined up, all their evidence gathered. But I think what we're going to see is that this is really going to be the focal point of this investigation moving forward, Alex.
That's what a lot of the reports have kind of covered, too, and it's kind of the convergence of what was called the Doomsday type of series that they're now calling it, in coordination with this real-life type of religious extremist group, which, I'm not going to speculate as to what they necessarily believe, but authorities are looking to see if there is any tie between this fiction type of novel and the real beliefs of this organization. But really quick, before I let you go, too, what comes next in this investigation? What should we be looking out for?
I think really, as you mentioned it earlier in the segment, I think that authorities are really just trying to gather the evidence that they need. As of now, the parents have been living in Hawaii. They vacated the residence in Rexburg, Idaho. They've been in Hawaii. The kids have not been seen. They failed to meet that order to produce the kids within 5 days. They are still, at this point in the investigation, they're still persons of interest. They haven't been taken into custody. I think what they're doing right now is gathering their evidence to make the solid case to arrest them in connection with these kids' disappearance. We know that the grandparents have hired a private investigator. Obviously, it's a case that's garnering national interest.
Right.
So I think what we're going to see is really like the pieces of this puzzle are going to start coming together, and it's going to paint a big picture. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, it's looking very likely that these kids are no longer alive. But of course, authorities are now investigating the circumstances and what exactly led up to their disappearance in the first place, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex case. You've done a great job keeping up with it this far. Of course, we're all wishing the best right now. Adonis Albright, thank you very much for joining us tonight.